Have you ever wondered how far someone would be willing to go to protect those they love? In the heart of the Old West, in lands marked by arid mountains, sacred rivers, and the distant sound of horse hooves, an Apache warrior named Dakota made a decision that would forever change the destiny of his family, and also of his tribe. This is not just a story of battle or survival, but a legacy of courage, honor, and sacrifice that has crossed generations and remains alive to this day. Stay with me until the end, because what you are about to discover may surprise and move you more than you can imagine. At that time, the Old West was not just the stage for duels between cowboys or disputed territories among settlers. It was also the land of the natives, men and women who carried within themselves a deep connection with nature and an unshakable sense of duty toward their families and their people. The Apaches, known for their bravery and resilience, were tireless guardians of their culture and their homes. Dakota was one of these warriors. More than physical strength, he carried in his eyes the flame of determination, the one that only burns in those who know their mission is greater than themselves. But what happens when the peace of a village is threatened by men who see only wealth in what is sacred to others? When the ambition of an outsider can destroy in hours a tradition built over centuries? It is in this moment that true courage is revealed. Imagine the weight Dakota carried when he realized that his tribe was about to be attacked by bounty hunters, led by a ruthless man, Marshall Carter, known for never backing down from anything to achieve his goals. Have you ever gone through this? Feeling that the future of those you love depends on your choice? That any wrong decision could cost not only your life but the lives of everyone around you? This is exactly the feeling Dakota faced. A cruel dilemma, in which fighting meant exposing the innocent and fleeing meant losing honor. For an Apache warrior, there was no easy option. There was only the path of sacrifice. The Old West has always been the stage for grand stories, but few are as intense as that of a man who decides to carry the weight of battle alone to save others. With every step Dakota took, the arid landscape seemed to witness his destiny. The desert winds blew as if to announce the importance of that choice. He knew that upon leaving his village, he might never again see his wife, Nayeli, nor hold in his arms little Chenua, his son who represented the hope of a free future. What you are about to hear in this story is not just an account of struggle, but the living memory of a man who turned his pain into legacy. Dakota was not a hero in the common sense of the word. He was a father, a husband, an Apache warrior who decided to face the darkness alone so that his tribe could continue to see the light of dawn. And that decision still echoes today as an example that true value does not lie in seeking glory, but in ensuring that those we love have the chance to go on. So take a deep breath, because the journey you're about to follow goes far beyond the legends we hear about the Old West. It reveals the power of courage in its purest form, the strength of a man willing to do anything for his family, and the memory of a sacrifice that will never be forgotten. And from this moment on, every detail will transport you inside this story, where honor and survival meet in a single destiny. And while you let yourself be carried away by this story of courage and sacrifice, I want to make you a sincere invitation. Every detail you have heard so far is not just a narrative about the Old West, but also a mirror of something we all carry within us, the will to protect those we love and to leave behind a legacy that matters. That is why I would love to know what you feel when hearing this story. Have you ever gone through a moment where you had to choose between the easy and the right? Share your experience here in the comments, your opinion, or even the emotion that this narrative awakened in you. Your voice has value, and when you comment, you are not only speaking to me, but also inspiring other people who will read and relate. And since we are together in this purpose of keeping alive stories that move and transform, I also ask you to leave your like on this video. It may seem like just a click, but in practice, it is the gesture that shows me that this content made sense to you, and that it is worth continuing to bring more stories like this. It is an act of reciprocity. You receive the inspiration, and with a simple like, you help spread this message to even more people who need to hear something like this today. Now, if this universe of moving stories of the Old West, of courage, honor, and sacrifice speaks to your heart, then I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Here you will always find narratives that go beyond the surface, stories that carry deep values and remind us of the strength that exists within each human being. But I must be honest, Not all of these stories are told out there. Many are lost in time, and that is precisely why every subscription matters. It is the way to ensure that you don't miss anything that is yet to come. After all, some stories are rare, almost forgotten, and this channel exists to rescue them and keep them alive. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this kind of content. So comment, leave a like and subscribe, because together we can create a true community of people who value the courage, honor, and legacy of the generations that came before us. And now, let's move forward, because Takoda's journey is only just beginning. Among arid mountains and silent valleys, the life of the Apaches followed its own rhythm, connected to the cycle of nature and to ancestral traditions passed down from generation to generation. The desert, for those unfamiliar with it, might seem only like a hostile place marked by the scorching heat of the day and the cutting cold of the night. But for that tribe, every stone, every hidden river among the rocks, and every twisted tree carried meaning. It was a territory that taught resilience, discipline, and reverence for the spirits that, according to them, guarded life in every detail. There, silence was not emptiness, but filled with stories, secrets, and a hidden truth that few could perceive. It is in this setting that Takoda emerges, an Apache warrior whose presence commanded respect but also inspired trust. He was not the oldest in the tribe, nor the most physically imposing, but there was something in his gaze that conveyed determination. His courage came from within, fueled by a mindset shaped by the harshness of the desert and an unshakable commitment to his family and his people. Takoda believed that every decision had an impact beyond the present. For him, protecting the village was not only about defending territory, but about ensuring that the legacy of the ancestors was not forgotten. At his side was Nayeli, his wife, a woman of strong spirit and serene gaze, who carried in her gestures the gentleness of someone who knew how to care, but also the firmness of someone who sustained hope in the most difficult days. Nayeli was more than a companion. She was the guardian of the intimacy of their home. When the nights grew heavy, it was her voice that brought peace. When uncertainty loomed, it was her embrace that restored strength. And between them was Chenoa, the small child who symbolized the future. Still a child, with curious eyes and tireless energy, Chenoa represented the promise of continuity, the living proof that, even in times of threat, life found a way to flourish. This triad, Takoda, Nayeli, and Chenoa, was the heart of a narrative that at first glance seemed like just another story of the Old West. But looking deeper, it reveals itself as a universal portrait of what we all seek: safety, love, and belonging. The tribe saw in Takoda not just a warrior, but a silent leader, someone capable of making difficult decisions and at the same time respecting the wisdom of the elders and the spirit of the land. Behind every ritual in the celebrations around the fire, it was he who conveyed to the young the importance of discipline and courage. And yet, even in the face of this respect, Takoda remained human. He carried fears, doubts, and invisible pressures, just like anyone who finds themselves faced with responsibilities greater than themselves. The transformation he experienced was not only that of a warrior in constant preparation for battle, but of a man learning to balance the force of war with the tenderness of fatherhood. Every look exchanged with Nayeli, every smile received from Chenoa, was like a silent reminder that his journey was not only one of struggle, but also of love. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, because understanding Takoda's bond with his family also means understanding why his courage grew so intense. It was not just about protecting land, but about ensuring that Nayeli and Chenoa had a tomorrow, that his son's laughter would not be silenced by the violence threatening his people, that traditions would not be torn away by the force of invasion. It was as if every daily gesture, from the act of hunting to feed the village to the simple sharing of stories at night, carried symbolic weight, a value that went beyond the present moment and became part of something greater. The truth is that in every detail, Takoda's life reflected the essence of courage, not the absence of fear, but the decision to face it to protect what mattered most. And it is in this balance between humanity and heroism that the impact of his story lies, a story that continues to echo because it awakens in each of us the reminder that we too are guardians of something greater. The desert, which until then seemed to hold only the sound of the wind and the dance of shadows among the mountains, began to carry a different silence. It was not the natural silence of the night, but the kind that precedes a sudden change, almost as if the land itself sensed that something dangerous was approaching. The elders of the tribe noticed it first, subtle signs of movement in the distance, fresh horse tracks on trails once used only by the Apaches themselves, remains of campfires that did not belong to the village. It was as if the backdrop of a threat was being set before watchful eyes, but still without revealing the whole hidden truth of what was to come. Takoda felt the weight of it on his skin, as if the desert sand were sending him a silent warning. His mindset, trained to perceive every detail of the environment, caught what many did not see. The air seemed heavier, the sounds of the nocturnal animals were fading, and even the behavior of the wind carried a strange sense of urgency. The tribe's journey was about to be interrupted by forces that sought not coexistence, but domination and exploitation. And then the threat materialized. Settlers, accompanied by bounty hunters, advanced toward those lands. Leading them was Marshal Carter, a cold, calculating man known for his ability to bargain lives as if they were nothing more than pieces on a board of power. Carter was not merely after land. He sought resources, water, control, and above all, the imposition of his own authority. Wherever he passed, hope tended to wither. For the Apache tribe, it was not just a matter of losing territory, it was the rupture of an ancestral bond with the land, with the sacred rivers, and with the memory of their ancestors. Every tree, every stone had meaning, and to see it threatened was like watching their very heart put to the test. Nayeli, even with her serenity, felt the tension spread through the families of the village. Mothers gathered their children earlier, men sharpened spears and arrows, and the elders gathered in whispered conversations, seeking answers in ancient spiritual revelations. Takoda, in turn, found himself facing decisions that demanded far more than physical strength. It was a mental battle, a dilemma between acting impulsively or strategically. The transformation of a warrior into a leader required not only courage, but the ability to think about the impact of each choice. He knew that if they confronted Carter and his men directly, the village risked being destroyed. But he also knew that retreating without a fight could be seen as weakness, and weakness in the Old West was an invitation to even more violent attacks. The backstage of this tension revealed itself in small, everyday scenes: children playing in silence without their usual laughter, warriors watching the boundaries of the village with stern expressions, the firelight reflecting in Takoda's eyes as he gazed at Chenoa's face, wondering if that son would have the chance to grow up in peace. It was in those moments that the hidden truth of his responsibility became heavier. It wasn't just his own life at stake, but the future of everyone. Marshal Carter, on the other hand, advanced with confidence. He knew the reputation of the Apaches as feared warriors, but he believed his own cold hunter's mindset gave him an advantage. For him, there was no room for emotion. Each conquered village was just another step in his journey toward power. He did not see Takoda as a man, but as an obstacle. And perhaps it was precisely this contempt that would give the story its most intense tone. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, because the arrival of this threat was not only an external conflict, but also a turning point within the tribe itself. It was the moment when it became clear who was willing to fight, who sought to flee, and who still believed negotiation could bring some peace. Takoda spent sleepless nights, walking silently along the sacred river, where he usually went to clear his mind. The sound of the water hitting the stones seemed louder than ever, almost like an echo of his own thoughts. Each step in the sand was a reminder of the responsibility he carried. He looked up at the starry sky and wondered if the ancestors were listening to him, if they could feel the weight of his doubts. It was not just a matter of strategy, but of life and death. Every decision had an impact that could forever change the history of his tribe. The hidden truth behind that apparent calm was that Takoda was facing a dilemma few could endure. Fighting head-on would mean exposing women and children to massacre. Fleeing would mean betraying honor and forever losing the respect of his people. This silent tension transformed his days. Even the simplest rituals, like sharpening the blade of his knife or preparing his bow for the hunt, seemed laden with another meaning. It was as if every daily gesture was a rehearsal for the sacrifice. He already felt being born within him. The mindset Takoda had built over the years, as a warrior, a father, a guardian, now condensed into a single point, demanding not just physical strength, but a moral courage capable of overcoming any fear. He could see in Nayeli's eyes that she sensed something, even without words. There was a silent complicity between them, a deep understanding that crucial moments were approaching. The children of the village played less. The smell of smoke from the fires seemed denser. Warriors exchanged glances without saying a word. Everything indicated that the storm was approaching, and Takoda felt time running short. The stories he told Chenoa before bed now sounded like veiled farewells, even if he didn't want to admit it. It was a setting where every detail gained symbolic weight. The horse spirit always ready, the knife sheathed beside the bed, the war paint carefully kept. Everything seemed to prepare him for a definitive act. It was in this state of constant vigilance that an idea began to take shape in his mind. Not an elaborate plan, but a raw intuition, almost an inner calling. If he could lure Carter and his men away from the village, he could buy time for the others to hide or regroup. It would be an absolute risk, a one-way path, but perhaps the only way to save the innocent. This revelation came like a spark, and at the same time, like an even greater weight. To sacrifice himself meant leaving Nayeli and Chenoa behind, meant never. Again, seeing his son's eyes grow meant becoming a legend before his time. The transformation Takoda experienced was silent but intense. He was no longer just a warrior planning his next defense. He was a man about to write his own story with the ink of sacrifice. Behind his thoughts, he reviewed every detail. The desert's secret paths, the water sources unknown to the settlers, the escape routes that could ensure his people's survival. There was no room for error. His decision needed to be precise, swift, and above all invisible until the right moment. As he walked through the village at dawn, he saw the faces of the people who trusted him. Young warriors learning to shoot arrows, women preparing food, children running between the tents. Each look was a reminder of why he was willing to risk everything. It was a deep contrast, the fear that tried to dominate him, and the calm he needed to show so as not to spread panic. The psychological impact was immense, but Takoda held a firm posture, as if he had already accepted his destiny. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because this moment of decision was not just a physical sacrifice, but a true inner rite of passage. It was the rawest revelation of his journey, transforming from guardian into shield, from leader into offering. This is the essence of the dilemma that separates ordinary men from those who leave behind a legacy that resonates beyond time. The night fell heavily over the desert, bringing with it a silence even deeper than on other days. The moon lit the camp with a silvery light, reflecting on the stretched skins of the tents and creating shadows that danced like omens on the sandy ground. The fire burned low, crackling at irregular intervals, as if even it hesitated before the charged atmosphere of that night. Takoda moved away from the circle of warriors, who whispered among themselves about strategies and possibilities, and walked toward his tent. Each step seemed heavier, as if the ground itself resisted the decision he was about to make. Inside, Nayeli awaited him. Her eyes reflected the flickering flame of the oil lamp, but also revealed that she already somehow knew what was coming. The connection between the two was so deep that words were not always necessary. Still, that night, words needed to be spoken. Takoda knelt before her, took her hands, and with a grave, trembling voice, revealed what he had been keeping in silence. He told her about the threat growing each day, about Marshal Carter and his men, and about the only decision that, in his heart, seemed capable of saving the tribe. Nayeli listened in silence, but her eyes filled with tears. They were not tears of despair, but of understanding. She knew that Takoda spoke not only as a warrior, but as a father and husband. He sought neither glory nor recognition. He sought only to protect the son who slept just a few steps away. The soft, rhythmic breathing of Chenoa mixed with the heavy silence of the tent, reminding them of what was at stake. Their dialogue was intimate, filled with emotion and raw truths. Takoda promised that, whatever happened, he would ensure Chenoa grew up free, that the boy's innocence would not be stolen by the brutality of Carter's men. It was a promise that hurt, because it came with the awareness that perhaps he would not be there to see that future. But for Takoda, life was not measured by the time one lives, but by the impact of the decisions one makes. And his decision was clear: to sacrifice himself to protect those he loved. Nayeli, with the silent strength she had always carried, held Takoda's face in her hands and told him that the spirit of the ancestors would be at his side. She asked only that he not forget, even in the midst of battle, that their love was his greatest weapon. This hidden truth struck Takoda like lightning, bringing him a mixture of pain and courage. He knew the path was set, but the memory of the love they shared would become his strength on the journey that would begin at dawn. Outside, the wind blew stronger, beating against the skins of the tent like an ancestral drum. The sound seemed to announce the approach of something inevitable. Takoda closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the rhythm of the wind, the crackling of the distant fire, and the soft breathing of his son. It was as if life's backstage was showing him, in small signs, that there was no turning back. Even so, in that instant, he found an unexpected peace. Not the peace of someone who gives up, but of someone who accepts the weight of his own destiny. The music of silence, broken by the whisper of the wind, created an atmosphere of suspense and almost tangible emotion. Takoda lay down beside Nayeli and Chinoa, knowing that perhaps it was the last time he would feel that family warmth. He said nothing more, because he knew the words had already been spoken. What remained was to engrave in his memory the image of his sleeping son, and the gentle touch of the woman who had always been by his side. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because understanding Takoda's last night with his family is to understand how great decisions are born from the intertwining of love and pain. It is in these silent backstages that the true transformation of an ordinary man into a legend is revealed, and it is precisely this that gives strength to his journey. The dawn arrived with a different, heavy silence, as if the earth itself knew that something important was about to happen. The sky still held the stars, but on the horizon orange tones were already appearing, announcing the sunrise. Takoda rose before everyone. The village remained at rest, with the faint crackling of fires dying out and the distant sound of a few night dogs. He walked to Spirit, his trusted horse, who also seemed to sense the approaching journey. As he stroked the animal's neck, Takoda felt a tightening in his chest, but he did not let weakness show. It was the moment to turn pain into courage. He mounted Spirit with the firmness of one who knew that every step from then on carried a greater meaning. There was no more room for hesitation. The mindset that guided his ancestors now came alive in him, reminding him that honor was not in living forever, but in fighting for something that transcended existence itself. As he rode toward the enemy camp, Takoda let the cold dawn wind cut across his face, almost as if it washed away his last doubts. The path was solitary, and in that silence he plunged into his own reflections. He thought of Chinoa, of how he would like to see him grow, learn to hunt, listen to stories around the fire, understand the importance of every decision that shapes a man's destiny. He thought of Nayeli, of her silent strength, of the steady gaze that sustained him even when everything seemed to collapse. It was as if he carried within himself not only memories, but a purpose, and that purpose was what gave him the strength to face death head-on. Takoda also reflected on the legacy of the ancient warriors. He recalled the stories told by the elders of heroes who had sacrificed their lives to ensure the Apache people continued to exist. Now he understood, in a raw and painful way, the weight of those narratives. They were not just stories to inspire the young, but hidden truths that revealed the essence of what it means to be part of something greater than oneself. His journey was no different. It was the continuation of that same thread of courage that stretched across generations. With every strike of Spirit's hooves on the arid ground, Takoda felt the approach of the battle taking shape. The cold of dawn contrasted with the heat of adrenaline already coursing through his body. There were no certainties, only the conviction that his sacrifice would have impact. He did not see himself as a hero, but as a human shield, willing to bear the weight of violence on his back so that his tribe might have the chance to survive. The landscape around him seemed to take part in the scene. The distant mountains observed like silent witnesses, the wind blew like ancestral chants, and even the moon, about to disappear, seemed to accompany him in what could be his last ride. It was as if the entire universe conspired to record that moment of transformation. In the back of his mind, a mixture of fear and courage confronted one another, but Takoda chose to hold on to the deepest value: honor. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because this solitary walk was not only physical, it was an inner dive, a revelation about what truly defines a warrior. It is not brute strength nor victory in battles, but the ability to place the lives of others above one's own. It is at this point that Takoda's journey ceases to be just another Old West story and becomes a universal symbol of sacrifice and courage. With every step Spirit advanced, Takoda felt the weight of the decision turning into reality. The enemy camp appeared on the horizon like an open wound in the desert, makeshift tents, horses tied up, and men scattered around fires that burned too high, almost as if in defiance of the night's silence. Carter was there, standing, arms crossed, watching his men as if commanding pieces in a cruel game. His cold gaze cut through the darkness, and for a moment, Takoda realized that this confrontation would not be only physical, but also a clash of mindsets, the calculating greed of a hunter against the ancestral courage of an Apache warrior. Takoda dismounted Spirit in silence and advanced through the shadows, using his own knowledge of the land as a weapon. He knew where to step so as not to be heard, how to use the wind to confuse the enemy's senses, and how to turn every detail of the terrain into an advantage. The desert, which for Carter and his men was nothing but hostility, for Takoda was a loyal ally. This hidden truth gave him an initial advantage, but also brought the awareness that he could not withstand them for long. When the first arrow cut through the air and struck one of Carter's men, the camp plunged into chaos. Shouts, running, blind gunfire. Takoda moved like a shadow, appearing where no one expected, taking down enemies with precision. He did not fight with strength alone. He fought with strategy, as if every movement were part of an invisible choreography. Courage blended with intelligence, and for moments, it seemed as if a single man could defeat dozens. Carter watched, irritated but also intrigued. He recognized the enemy's skill and in some corner of his calculating mind even felt a twinge of respect. But respect did not change his resolve. He gave sharp orders, organized his men, and surrounded Takoda. The fight became unequal, and though each blow from Takoda brought down an opponent, each movement also cost him more effort. Blood flowed from open wounds, his breathing grew heavy, and his body began to show signs of exhaustion. The impact of the clash was brutal. Bullets tore through the air, knives crossed, and dust rose like a veil that made everything more confusing. But even in this chaotic setting, Takoda held firm to his mindset. He was not there to win, but to delay, to distract, to ensure his village had time to escape. This revelation gave strength to his arms, even when there was no energy left, made his legs move even when every muscle screamed for rest. Then came the inevitable moment. A precise shot pierced his shoulder, and soon another struck his chest. Takoda staggered, but still brought down another opponent with the short blade he carried. His bravery seemed inexhaustible, but his body could no longer match the intensity of his mind. Carter approached, observing the wounded Apache warrior, and for an instant the scene froze. There was no mockery in the enemy's gaze, only the realization that he was facing a different kind of man, someone who carried within himself something greater than life itself. Takoda fell to his knees, feeling the warm blood run down his body, yet he kept his eyes fixed, never showing submission. In that final look, there was not defeat, but the certainty that his journey had fulfilled its purpose. He had faced Carter and his men, had turned the desert into an ally, and had, with his own life, bought the time necessary for his family and his tribe to survive. It was the physical end of a man, but also the birth of a legacy that would never be forgotten. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because the scene of the final confrontation is not just about Takoda's death, but about the revelation that true courage does not depend on the outcome of the fight, but on the decision to fight, even when everything seems lost. It is at this point that we understand how a sacrifice can echo beyond life and become eternal inspiration. Takoda's blood mingled with the desert sand, but even at the limit of his strength, he still found clarity to act. Each movement was calculated not by the hope of victory, but by the strategy of luring Carter and his men away from the village. He knew every curve of the terrain, every rock formation that could confuse the pursuers. With quick strikes and unexpected charges, he guided the enemies in another direction, like someone driving a herd without them even realizing it. It was the last decision of a warrior, not to fight for himself, but to turn his own death into a shield for his people. In the distance, Nayeli and Chenoa watched. They had discreetly followed to a high point among the rocks, from where they could see the glow of the fires and hear the echoes of battle. Nayeli's heart shattered with every blow Takoda received, but within her also bloomed a silent pride. She understood that this was not just the man she loved, but a living symbol of the strength that would sustain the tribe even after his passing. Chenoa, still small, did not grasp the full gravity, but felt the intensity of the moment. The boy's gaze carried innocence mixed with the intuition that something irreversible was happening before him. When Takoda finally fell to his knees, Carter's men stepped back for a moment, perhaps waiting for the final blow. But Carter did not rush. He approached slowly, analyzing that warrior who, though wounded and bleeding, remained upright and kept his eyes fixed. There was no submission in Takoda. There was only the firmness of someone who had fulfilled his mission. It was in that instant that even the enemy, accustomed to seeing life only as business, felt the impact of the scene. Carter, cold and calculating, recognized the Apache's courage, not as one who praises, but as one who witnesses a hidden truth. Some men are not defeated. They only surrender life for something greater. With his death, Takoda achieved what he had sought. Carter, without realizing it, had been dragged far from the village. His men, tired and confused, followed along, without noticing that the warrior's objective had been fulfilled. The tribe, protected by the distance, had time to escape and regroup. The sacrifice turned into a silent victory, and the desert forever kept the memory of that moment. The scene was etched not only into the stones and sand, but into the minds and hearts of those who witnessed it. Nayeli held Chenoa against her chest, allowing the tears to flow but remaining strong so that her son would understand the greatness of what he was seeing. She knew that this moment would become the foundation of the boy's upbringing, the starting point for him to grow up knowing that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to face the inevitable with dignity. Behind the scenes of this story, something even deeper was happening. The impact of Takoda's sacrifice did not end that dawn. The gesture would carry across the years, become a story told around the fires, inspire young warriors, and remind everyone that the legacy of a man is not in the wealth he accumulates, but in the purpose he leaves for others. Carter, for his part, even as he returned to his life of coldness and ambition, would forever carry the memory of that warrior's gaze. A troubling memory, almost like an invisible wound, reminding him that there are forces not even calculation can control. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because true legacy is not measured at the moment of death, but in the transformation that remains afterward. Takoda not only saved his family and his tribe, he left behind a seed of courage that would continue to bloom, generation after generation, as a beacon for all who seek to understand what it means to live with honor. The nights that followed Takoda's sacrifice were never the same. The void left by his absence was felt in every detail of the village, in the silence of children who asked fewer questions, in the distant gaze of the women who remembered him while preparing food, and in the silent respect of the warriors who raised their weapons more carefully. But at the same time, something new blossomed. Around the fires, when the stars shone as eternal witnesses, the elders began to tell the story of Takoda, and they did not tell it as an episode of sorrow, but as a narrative of courage and transformation. He was not remembered only as the man who fought against Carter, but as the one who chose to place the life of the tribe above his own. Every word spoken on those nights carried the power of a ritual. The children listened in silence, with their eyes fixed on the flames that seemed to dance to the rhythm of the narrative. The young grew up understanding that Takoda had not merely died, he had become a legend. And to be a legend meant to remain alive in the mindset of each generation. It was as if through the repetition of that story, his spirit was always present, walking among them, reminding them that honor is the foundation of survival. For Chenoa, this inheritance was even more intense. Growing up hearing about the father who had given his life to protect him was not just a burden, but a daily revelation of purpose. The boy, who had watched that night in silence without fully understanding, was shaped by the memory that everyone around him preserved. From an early age, he learned that every decision he made should carry the same weight of responsibility that had guided Takoda. He trained with discipline, not only to become strong, but to honor the blood that ran in his veins. As the years passed, Chinoa was not seen only as the son of a hero, but as someone who embodied within himself the wisdom left by that story. He did not allow himself to be carried away by impulses, always thought of the impact of his choices, and carried with him the serenity that recalled Nayeli's composure and the bravery that recalled Takoda's spirit. The tribe saw in him not just a warrior, but a leader in the making, capable of balancing courage and wisdom, strength and compassion. It was as if the backstage of his father's life had turned into an invisible map, guiding each step of his journey. The fire of the stories told around the village was more than simple tradition. It was a way of keeping alive the hidden truth that Takoda had not fought in vain. He had planted a seed that now blossomed in Chinoa, and in every child who grew up hearing his story. The sacrifice had become inspiration, and the inspiration had become collective strength. This silent transformation was what kept the tribe firm in the face of new challenges. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because when a life becomes legend, we are not only facing memories, but a legacy that shapes mindsets. Takoda's death was not the end, but the beginning of a new way of existing, an invisible presence that guided decisions, sustained courage, and nourished hope. And it is at this point that we understand how stories do not die. They remain alive, as long as someone keeps them burning in their heart. And if you made it this far, it's because this story truly spoke to you in some way. And that makes me glad, because it means that the message of courage and sacrifice that Takoda left still has impact, even after so long. That's why I want to ask you something simple. Leave your like on this video. This gesture shows that this journey made sense to you and helps me continue bringing content that touches and transforms, like this story we've just experienced, together. And since we're building this community of people who believe in the value of stories and in the power of the lessons they carry, subscribe to the channel. That way, you'll keep following other narratives like this one, full of revelations, hidden truths, and inspirations that help transform the way we look at life. Your subscription is the way to keep this cycle alive, so that more people have access to these stories and can be moved together with us. Now I want to know from you. If you were in Takoda's place, would you have the courage to sacrifice your own life to save your family? Write it in the comments. I would have that courage. I want to read your answer and feel how this reflection resonated with you. And of course, it doesn't end here. There's another story right here that will also move you. Click and continue with me there, because I'm sure you'll be surprised.